Hello and welcome to the second in a series of videos about sensorimotor OCD. This is something that I really struggled with myself in the past, and today we're going to be talking about breathing OCD. And this is when people's attention and awareness gets completely fixated on the breath. It doesn't matter what you're doing throughout your day. You might feel like you can't think about anything else than your breathing. And it gets incredibly frustrating and infuriating for the people who deal with this. I think one thing that really strikes me about the people who come to me who are struggling with sensorimotor OCD, breathing OCD, is the amount of frustration and sometimes hopelessness that people can feel about their situation. They kind of feel trapped, almost like they're always going to be aware of the breath now, and that there's nothing that they can do to not be aware of it. And of course, that's an incredibly difficult place to be if you're believing that to be true. If you really think that actually OCD has kind of created this trap for you and you can never get out of it, of course you're going to feel awful about that. But today's episode is all about giving you, tips so that you realize that actually there are things that you can do. And as I've mentioned before, I've really struggled with many different types of sensorimotor OCD over the years, and breathing was one of those. And, it really is a kind of classic type of OCD, though. Ultimately, it's no different than any other type of OCD. But I think because these types of OCD struggles with sensorimotor, because they feel like or can potentially be there all the time, even after you perform a compulsion, the awareness can actually still be there. And I think for that reason, it can feel like it's even harder than other types of OCD, but actually it functions in the same way. And really, it's no different than any other type of OCD. What happens is when we're struggling with it is we really don't want to be aware of the breath. Obviously, we're trying to do everything that we can to not actually think about it. But at the same time, by really trying to not be aware of it, all we're actually doing is drawing our attention to it even more. To really let go of it, we have to recognize that this is a kind of vicious circle that we get ourselves stuck in. If you think of a clock, at 12 o'clock, you have the obsession, the awareness of the breath. Then at 3 o'clock, you experience a huge amount of anxiety about that. At 6 o'clock, you might perform a compulsion, and that can be all sorts of different things. You might be checking to see if you're still aware of it. You might be ruminating about it. You might be going onto Google to try to find out more about it. There's all sorts of different compulsions that we can have with sensorimotor. And then at 9 o'clock, when you do these things, temporarily, you might feel a little bit better, but it's very, very fleeting. And of course, you just become aware of the breath again. And so, because you're kind of performing these compulsions, all they really do is they keep you stuck in the cycle, and they keep you kind of aware of the breath. And so really, in order for us to kind of get out of that trap, because it really is a kind of trap, we have to learn how to, stop performing that compulsion at 6 o'clock. If we can learn to be aware of the breathing, to notice the breathing, and to feel the anxiety that is giving us, but to not perform those compulsions, that's how we can learn how to kind of bring ourselves back into the present and to get out of this kind of trap of OCD. So let's get into some specific tips that can be really, really helpful in doing that. And a lot of these tips are based on my own personal experiences with sensorimotor OCD and breathing OCD. Let's get straight into it. So tip 1 is that you're actually allowed to be aware of your breath. I think this is perhaps one of the most important things. I think when we're struggling with sensorimotor OCD, there's this idea that I'm only going to feel better once I'm no longer actually aware of the thing that we're obsessing about, in this situation, the breath. And, that just isn't the case. Before you struggled with this, actually, you could be aware of the breath, you could tune into it, you could do meditation, for example, and pay attention to it, and it wouldn't really have been too much of a problem. The issue is right now that what's happened is you've kind of associated the breath with your anxiety and with your fear. And so now every time that you become aware of it or overly aware of it, you're also feeling a lot of anxiety about that. And you're telling yourself that that's bad and that you need to kind of get rid of that awareness. And I think, when we can instead learn how to acknowledge and accept that, our attention is on the breath, and that actually that's okay, that we don't need to get rid of that attention in order to start living our lives and in order to start to be happy. And this is such an important message. It's really in line as well with acceptance commitment therapy that really kind of teaches us, get back into your life and bring the difficult anxieties, awareness, whatever it is, along for the ride. You don't need to get rid of these things in order to start living your life and in order to start focusing on your goals and your values. And so tip one is that if you are aware of it, practice trying to bring a bit more acceptance of that, a bit more compassion of it. Right now, you're aware of it. You might even say to yourself, perhaps I'm going to be aware of my breath today. And if I am, so be it, but I'm going to get on anyway. I'm going to do the things that I need to do anyway. So often I think we're kind of waiting. We're waiting to feel right before we move on, with our day or with our lives. And, that tends to keep us stuck. So if you can choose, make a conscious decision to get back into your life, despite the fact that annoying, infuriating awareness might be there. Now, I know myself that it can be very difficult at times to obviously bring acceptance to these things. But you need to do your best to just try to acknowledge that it might be difficult and remind yourself each day, yeah, I'm aware of the breath still, and that's okay. I'm going to get on with whatever I need to do. And when you start practicing that on a day-to-day basis, it starts to build up over time. And I think over time, it really does start to become a little bit easier. Tip 2 is to break the rumination loop. One of the biggest issues that I found personally in my own situation with sensorimotor OCD is I was ruminating about it all day long, and that was actually a compulsion, and it was kind of keeping the awareness of these things much more, right there in front of me than if I actually learned to let go of that rumination. And when I did actually eventually learn how to let go of rumination, that's when the awareness started to move. It wasn't so much in my face anymore. It started to kind of disappear a little bit off to the left or a little bit off to the right. And I wasn't so fixated on it all the time. Rumination is really kind of one of the worst compulsions because it really does keep, that obsession in our consciousness in the worst kind of possible way. And there's a big difference between being aware of something and actually, thinking about the awareness of that thing. And I want you to really reflect on that for a second. You can be aware of the breath. You can notice it. You can feel the air coming in and out. You can notice your belly contracting when you're breathing. You can notice air coming in through your nose, all of the different sensations of the breath. You can be aware of those things, but you don't actually have to think about them all the time. And this is the difference here. If you're ruminating about the breath, that's a compulsion. If you're just aware of the breath, well, that's something that just happens. You can't really control that. If you try to control that, you're likely to just make yourself more aware of it. So the key here is to do your very best to acknowledge that, yeah, you do have some awareness of the breath, but that you're not going to engage in rumination about it, worrying about it, trying to figure it out, trying to have more certainty about it in different ways. Whatever it is, whatever the thinking is about the awareness, you've got to learn to let go of that and instead try to come back to the present. Again, try to focus on your goals, on your values. If you're having a conversation with somebody, try to be more present in that conversation. It's all about refocusing your attention back onto the present moment. And, if the awareness is there, we'll bring it along for the ride. Because, when we take that kind of attitude, often the awareness does begin to take a bit of a back seat over time. Tip 3 is to anchor yourself into the present moment. Now, traditionally, many ways of anchoring might actually involve the breath. And actually, if you wanted to do a kind of exposure activity, well, that's something that could be beneficial, where you use the breath for 2 or 3 minutes and you do some deep, slow breathing to kind of ground yourself and anchor yourself into the present moment. And we also know that helps to relax us for a short while as well. And if you put a time element on it too, so that it's only for 3 minutes, then it can be a good exposure activity where that there's an end in sight to paying attention to your breath on purpose. So, that could also be a helpful exposure activity. But there's other ways to practice anchoring other than just using your breath. You can use your body. For example, right now I'm sat in a chair, and I can even practice anchoring as I'm speaking to you doing this video. I can be more aware of my body in the chair. I can feel myself supported in the chair. I can feel my feet on the floor, and becoming more aware of your other senses and how you feel in a given moment can help to bring you a little bit less, away out of that hyper focus onto your breath, and much more into the rest of your body. You can also use what you can see around you to anchor yourself. Try to really pay attention to other things that you can see in the room that you're in, or if you're outdoors, try to pay attention to the scenery, trees that you can see, or other people that might be going by. Whatever it is that you can pay attention to, just try to notice those things for a moment or two. You can do the same with what you can hear. And by coming into the present like this, what you're doing is you're expanding your awareness. When we're really struggling with sensorimotor, it's like we have a kind of spotlight, and that spotlight is shining directly on the breath. And really what we have to do is we want to have a floodlight instead, where we're really paying attention to a much bigger picture. And if you're still aware of the breath while you're doing these things, well, that's okay. But the important thing is now that you're also aware of other things as well, and you're anchoring yourself a little bit more into the present moment. And that can be really, really helpful. And tip 4 is to do your best to not be afraid of the breath. And it's really about trying to do simple, very easy exposure activities here and there throughout your day. Prove to yourself that you can just pay attention to your breath for 1 minute, for example, and really make sure during that time that you're really paying attention to every element of the breath, noticing it all. And after 1 minute, stop the timer, and then on you get with the rest of your day. It's really important afterwards, though, that you kind of get on with the rest of your day, that you don't sit there ruminating about, if this is going to work, or if you're going to be aware of the breath the whole day. Remember about the other steps that we've already talked about, and try to apply those after you do any kind of exposure activity. And another thing that can be helpful is exercises like progressive body relaxation, where you're using the breath to actually calm the body. I think this is powerful as well, because so often we become fearful of the breath, and actually the breath is our ally. It can actually really help us to be calmer, to be more relaxed, to feel more comfortable in our bodies. And so if you can learn how to do something like progressive body relaxation, and what you do is you lie down at home on a bed or on a sofa, or even on a yoga mat on the floor, And you're going to breathe deeply into the different parts of your body. You're going to breathe down into your feet 3 or 4 times, and then relax your feet. Every time that you breathe into your feet, you're going to imagine that the feet are relaxing. Some people find it helpful when they breathe to imagine they're breathing in a white light, and this white light is helping your body to relax. And then you move up to the ankles, and then you move up to the lower leg, and then into the knees, all the way through the body. And, at the end of doing this, after about 10-15 minutes, you often tend to feel really relaxed. And actually what you're doing is you're teaching yourself that the breath is actually something that can help you to relax. It's not something that you need to be fearful of. So there we go, guys. Those are my tips for breathing OCD. Before you go, just a few words of encouragement. This is something that I really struggled with for years. I really felt like it was ruining my life for a long time. But when I started to apply the tips that I've shared today, and I really started to live my life despite the fact that that the awareness of the breath would be there sometimes, or a lot of the time at the beginning, and it would be really bothering me. Over time, when I really stuck to focusing on my goals, on my values, things really did change for me. And today it's not something that bothers me at all. And so, I really hope that was helpful for you. Please do subscribe if you found it helpful. There will be many more videos coming about sensorimotor OCD in this series. So do please check them out. And I look forward to seeing you next time. This video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are dealing with OCD, anxiety, or any mental health concerns, please consult a licensed mental health professional for support.